The Hawaiian Islands. One island, one naval base. In the island of Oahu, the United States has a naval base in Pearl Harbor, west of Honolulu. Nearly 18,000 men and 200 women were stationed in Pearl Harbor. As the thousands of American citizens work in the base, the Japanese Rising Sun launches a preemptive strike against the U.S.
This is an emergency communication to Hawaiian Defense Headquarters. The roar of the planes you now hear is not a practice maneuver now. It's not a maneuver. We're being attacked. It's an air raid.
The Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor on December the 7th, 1941, here dramatically shot by Japanese film crews for propaganda purposes, not only crippled America's Pacific fleet, it changed the course of history. Just the day before the raid, President Roosevelt had personally appealed to Emperor Hirohito not to drag their two countries into war. But it was too late. Japan had formed a secret pact with Germany to attack the Allied forces in Europe and in the Far East. America at that stage was neutral, but generally sympathetic to the Allied cause. This was an attempt to destroy American military power in the Pacific before she could strike back. After this massive attack, Europe's war became America's, as Senator Connolly, chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee, made abundantly plain.
With unbelievable treachery and craftiness, Japan has attacked our territory and murdered American citizens. Japan began this war in treachery. We shall end it in victory.
Within hours of the Pearl Harbor raid, American Army and Navy officers were called from their homes and weekend golf clubs to meet at the War Department to prepare to retaliate. President Roosevelt officially informed Congress that a state of war now existed between the United States and Japan. Within hours, Congress gave him the authority to prosecute the conflict all out. The legacy of the raid was enormous. 5 American battleships were sunk or damaged beyond repair. 200 aircraft were destroyed and more than 2,400 people killed. But more than that, Pearl Harbor led directly to what truly became the Second World War.
After the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor and the United States declaration of war on Japan, President Franklin D. Roosevelt signs and issues Executive Order 9066 on February 19, 1942. This gave the United States military the power and authority to seize and relocate any citizen within the coastal areas in the states of Washington, Oregon, California, and inland of Arizona. Executive Order 9066 focused on the relocation of Japanese American citizens to internment camps.
Then on December of 1941, well, no, it was probably a little later, President Roosevelt and Congress passed a bill stating that all persons of Japanese ancestry will be taken out of the West Coast area and putting into internment camps that we're building. And my sister and them in Internment Island got a notice saying that in 48 hours, all of you people living on Internment Island, nobody had homes, owned homes, because that was the naval property and you couldn't. They were homes built by the canneries that operated there. And so they were told that each of you will be allowed to take one suitcase and then you will be driven, taken to an internment camp, temporary camp. Well, fortunately for me, I was able to pull out of school and go back home because I didn't feel that I wanted to be put into an internment camp without my parents. So I went back to Indio, and my sister, who was living there, ended up at a racetrack where a lot of them had to live in horse stalls for a while, and I think that, I'm glad that I went home. And at home, things were about the same as usual. That was the time of the year that folks planted their crops, and they were all farmers there in India, and they were busy. They decided they'd go ahead and plant because nobody talked about relocation for us in India. And so I went to work in the fields with the family, and everything seemed to be going okay until May the 22nd, when our crops started harvesting, and we got a notice. Actually, I was working on the field there, and with my brother George, and I saw a uniformed man coming up to us, and I wondered what was going on, and this fellow.
In 1942, 100,000 Japanese Americans were relocated into internment camps. Within that year, Japanese Americans were given little time to gather as many possessions they could carry to take with them to the camps. Upon their arrival, the conditions were poor and inadequate. The living spaces could not accommodate for many families. Many Japanese Americans had to share living spaces with strangers and use the same facilities. Though living conditions and utility usage were insufficient, Japanese Americans were given education, recreational sports, farming, and other essentials for a stable community. Unfortunately, there was an unequal division amongst the Japanese Americans. Paying jobs were given to U.S. citizens or Nisei, while the Issei, who had worked hard for many years, were put aside. By the end of the war in 1945, 125,000 Japanese Americans lived in internment camps.
If we made life more tolerable in camp, then it was because somebody in the camp did something, not the administration. They didn't give us anything or help us in any way. But living in camp and finding a lot of things that we needed that we didn't have enough. I mean, sure, we had one toothpaste that we put in my father's suitcase because we only had one bathroom at home, and that's where our toothpaste was, and toothbrushes and soap, and it's surprising that they didn't provide us with soap or anything like that. In the laundry room there were no washing machines. It was just the steel tubs and washboards. I don't know if you people even know what washboards are, but that was the washing facility there, and of course I didn't want my mother to go there and work so much for us, and so I would wear the same socks for about 5 days, and they really smelled. But then I went to the shower and left my socks on and kind of washed them off, rinsed them off there to help my mother, and so that she wouldn't have to work so hard. But then, we didn't have any soap and stuff, so we had to get help through the Sears Roebuck catalog, and we didn't have much money either, and so by the time we were in there for about 3 or 4 months, we had already run out of money, and so I got a job in camp. It was chopping down mesquite trees and hauling them away. The cooks in the camp decided that they're going to have to grow some vegetables so that they'll have some decent meals, and so they were clearing off the land there to make a little farm there to grow vegetables, and I worked there 8 hours a day, and they paid me $12 a month to work there.
Victory is within the United States' grasp. President Harry S. Truman of the United States of America was warned by his advisors that any attempt to invade Japan would result in horrific American casualties. Under development is a new secret weapon devised by an American physicist, J. Robert Oppenheimer, and it was codenamed the Manhattan Project. The Manhattan Project is the construction of the world's first 2 atomic bombs known to humanity. Upon completion and construction, President Truman authorized the use of both atomic bombs. On August 6, 1945, the first atomic bomb, nicknamed Little Boy, was dropped on Hiroshima, killing an estimate of 170,000 Japanese soldiers and civilians combined. After the first bomb was dropped, President Truman ordered Japan to surrender. Japan refused. Without any choice, Truman ordered the second bomb to be dropped. On August 9, 1945, the second atomic bomb called Fat Man was dropped on Nagasaki, killing an estimate of 80,000. After the second atomic bomb, Japan surrendered, ending World War II. The incarceration of the Japanese Americans did not end until June 30, 1946. While the Japanese Americans were kept in the camps, a man by the name of Fred Korematsu made an appeal and stood trial in the Supreme Court attempting to prove the justification of the use of the camps. Fred Korematsu's appeal was denied. In 1980, several civil rights groups formed by Japanese Americans demanded answers whether or not the camps were justified. President Jimmy Carter ordered an investigation to be conducted. In 1988, President Ronald Reagan signed the Civil Liberties Act, which officially apologized for the incarceration of the Japanese Americans, and the government paid $1.6 billion in reparations to all 82,000 Japanese Americans. Exploration was trying to find different ways to live in the camps. Encounter was the Japanese Americans being confronted by the American troops to be escorted to the internment camps. Exchange would be the type of criticism that the US had against the Japanese in the 1940s as we do now with the civilians in the Middle Eastern area.